DePIN Day investor panel moderator veteran, Rob, from Blockchange. Here's the mic, Rob.
Okay, cool. All right, and as my suddenly shy panelists, they weren't shy until just now, make their way over and collect their mics. So what we're going to do is just quickly, each of us is going to introduce ourselves, name, rank, and serial, so we won't subject you guys to long intros. And then I'm also going to ask each of the panelists just to give a little highlight so people understand kind of your level of engagement in DePIN investing. And then I've got a bunch of questions I'm going to walk them through. And we're a little tight on time, but if we do have some time, be happy to get audience questions as well. So maybe just set the stage, I'll go first. So Rob Schmults, I'm a general partner with Blockchange Ventures. We invest broadly in the blockchain space, but we've done, I guess, a dozen DePIN projects, many of whom actually are here today, which has been great, including our excellent event sponsor, Fluence. So anyway, very happy to be here. Anna?
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. I'm investor at DCG. DCG has been investing since 2014 in the space, so we have quite some DePIN portfolio as well, and really excited to be again on stage with you, Rob.
Another veteran.
Hey guys, I'm Vinny. I'm head of research at EV3, and I invest there as well. We are a DePIN-focused fund, started a couple years back with investments into companies like XNet, Andrina, and a bunch of others. So excited to chat with you guys.
Hi, this is June, the senior investor at Hash, and we are a crypto venture fund focused on real-world adoption. So we incubated Axie, which changed the lifestyle and the disposable income of Filipinos and a lot of Southeast Asians. We also was earliest investors for WorldCoin, which served the underbank to solve the catch-22 situation. And recently, we did also Story Protocol as well, which solves the IP issues to solve the real-world media and entertainment issues that we see. So, yeah, here we are. Yeah.
So June was telling me on his way over here, he actually went into the wrong building, and there's another DePIN event going on there, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if right now there's another DePIN venture capital panel at that event. So there's no shortage of venture interests in the space. And I'd love to just get from you guys sort of why, I know I'm interested in it, all three of you are very interested in it, you wouldn't be here. What is it that draws us to DePIN? Why do we like it so much? I know you're jet lagged. Are you ready to go first?
I think for me, what's really exciting is that you can incentivize unutilized resources, especially in sectors where you have high capex, oligopolistic structures like energy, broadband, and co. So I think for me, that's the most exciting part, that you can really accelerate these sectors.
I will just agree with everything she said and add on to that. I know that's a taboo. We're not supposed to do that.
It's giving me grief. Anyway, go ahead.
But I think the other thing, too, about DePIN that's incredibly exciting is that these technologies make sense. So there's a lot in crypto that I would struggle to explain to my mom. Yeah. But I can tell her, hey, here's a box. It serves cellular or it serves Wi-Fi, and we're going to put it in our room, and then we're not only going to serve coverage, but we're also going to benefit from it. And that narrative, that ability to convey that to lay individuals like my parents, I think that's something that also shouldn't be understated. So huge advantages to CapEx, but also it makes a lot of sense from a story perspective as well.
Yep. Let me add a little too, on a historical context more, because I think crypto space has been here for a long time, but the issue has been focusing too much on software and network layers, right? You have seen like EVMs, Cosmos, and parallelized EVMs focus on the network layers. But with physical infrastructure, it's the actual historical catalyst for any softwares to grow, right? If you look into the 1970s, there was the first personal computer called Aethir. But it wasn't commercialized, it wasn't mass adopted because the hardware wasn't there. Basically, mobile came in, laptops came in. Now everybody spends most of the time on screen. Even like, let's say Southeast Asian, they spend on average 10 hours just watching on the screen. It tells how hardware is a catalyst to solve the scalability issues of software that we see on different chains. So I think DePIN that's why excites me a lot about. Yeah. So yeah.
So I love that. So we've got one, Anna highlighting the fact that DePIN allows attackers to disrupt massive industries. Venture capitalists always like that. I loved your example because it's not just you can explain to your grandparents something interesting in the blockchain. You can explain it to LPs too, who oftentimes are scratching their heads, and you can give them a DePIN example, and they'll be like, oh, okay, I see what you guys are doing. And then the point around the fact that, hey, we've sort of seen this movie before, and DePIN's going to be the thing that's going to potentially really allow blockchain more broadly to achieve escape velocity. So I love all three of those answers. Let me ask you, going a little bit more specific. Are there any like attribute? Not all DePINs are the same, right? So not only they target different sectors, different markets, but they often will have different structures. And we heard on this stage earlier the difference between, I say, a software DePIN and a hardware DePIN. And some DePIN are passive in what the users have to do, and some are active. Are there attributes you guys, maybe not a hard and fast rule, but particularly like to see in a DePIN project? And maybe we'll go the other way this time. And it's okay if there aren't. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, for investment for Screen, I look highly into founder market fit, because VC is people's business, right? So it's easy to scale from 0 to 10 theoretically to a practical resolution, but eventually you have to scale from 10 to 100. And where that comes is basically, it's a huge plus if the founder or the core team actually has driven from grounds up an actual revenue generating project that's focused on that specific vertical. And a lot of projects happen doing that, like ranging from Rome, Daylight, Adrena, and the likes. And that's what I love to see, them coming into the Web3 space, touching on the Web3 total addressable market, but repeating what they have done in the iterative cycles in the Web2 space, with generating double-digit millions annual revenue and the like. So more on the founder market fit.
And so they've discovered like the DePIN model, like Anna was talking about, and said, oh, wait, I can use this to kind of advance a playbook maybe that I've done before.
Yes, exactly. It's a high value add hook, I would say, the decentralization part.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I just want to say, very excited that he mentioned Daylight and Adrena. Those are two companies that we're very excited about
I
as
love
well.
how you are shielding your own portfolio.
Hey, he mentioned it first, so I'm going to highlight it at the very
I have to
least.
shield those friends too,
Wait, do we all invest
That
in
is ours
Adrena?
as well.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I think all three of us have it.
Well, no, we're in Adrena too. So it may. Are you guys all in Adrena?
No, I'm not.
Oh,
But
okay,
I'm
okay.
just giving examples.
Say that would be. Anyway, let's get back on topic.
No, I think having a founder with product market fit, but also industry expertise is incredibly valuable. Another thing, though, that we've started to see as well is there's a rapid advancement happening in technologies, right? So initially, a couple years back, we started seeing DePIN projects that were focused on trying to set up their own nodes, trying to ensure that they had their own network, trying to run maybe their own blockchain, and now we're seeing shifts to other infrastructures, people building on Solana, for example, or building on an L2. And I think a founder that also has the ability to be malleable, to be moldable, to shift when needed and find product market fit is actually very, very rare and requires a deep understanding of the technology stack and a deep understanding of the other infrastructure solutions that are currently being worked on. So in addition to founders with industry expertise, I think the ability to shift, the ability to be malleable, and to sort of see where market trends are going is usually a pretty hard thing to find. And it's pretty special when we find it.
Okay. All right. Great.
So when it comes to attributes, I'm mostly looking for networks that are leveraging existing hardware. So laptops, smartphones, any edge devices. So I'm more the light, like not really, like other networks where you have to buy hardware, because that's not a frictionless user experience, right? And then besides that, as the others mentioned, looking for teams that have complementary founders, so both having industry understanding as well as crypto tokenomics understanding. And then thirdly, we are always looking at tokenomics, even as pre-seed stage, how teams are thinking long-term, especially in DePIN. So I think these are the three attributes that I'm mostly looking at.
That's great. So I think I really like the fact you all mentioned team, right? Because it just shows that just because you're a DePIN project doesn't mean you can't escape from some of the core things that venture capitalists look for. And I think just as the panelists just did, any VC worth his or her weight is going to tell you, well, it's always team at the top of the list, and everything flows from that. And then, Anna, I really like you mentioned the fact, and again, it's not a hard and fast rule, but this notion of latent assets that may already exist out in the marketplace, and this is what like Fluence is doing. They're taking advantage of the fact that there's these assets out there that you can unlock with the DePIN network and create a lot of value. Doesn't mean that things like, say, I don't know, Hivemapper aren't valid, but that it might be easier if the device is already in place, the asset. So speaking of maybe of Hivemapper, but certainly when I think about the sort of the DePIN projects that have been elevated to the pantheon of DePIN projects, right? It's very fitting that Breakpoint, depending on how good you are at walking around Singapore, is about 5 minutes that way. But that we always hear the names Render and Helium, right? As sort of, who else would you guys want to elevate to that? Like, hey, these guys should be on the list too of companies let's just accept Fluence is already on that list. So besides Fluence, who else do you guys think should be up there when we give the kind of examples that your grandmother would understand? Like, who are the kind of pantheon?
I mean, maybe because you mentioned Hivemapper, nothing against them.
Yeah.
We are investors in Natix, and I'm really excited. I mean, you as well, and I guess you too, right? Natix. Yeah. So I think why I'm excited about them because they fit the three attributes that I just mentioned, especially that they are leveraging existing hardware, to smartphones to collect geospatial data, real-time data that is super important for autonomous driving and training AI models. So that's definitely something that's going to be huge in the future. So I would highlight it.
That's great. I approve of that example.
So I think I'll highlight a couple right now. I mean, when we think about technologies that everybody uses all the time, right? We think about mobile services. You have Helium, you have XNet. We have Richard spoke earlier today. We also think about Wi-Fi and ISPs, and to that we have Andrina, led by Neil and Benedict, sitting right here right now, and I think that team is doing some incredible work. Their growth models is actually very solid. Their tokenomics are quite interesting. They're pioneering a medallion method that we help them sort of work on a little bit. So anyone interested in some novel tokenomics, I highly recommend looking into that. And I think those teams sort of do a very good job highlighting how these are public goods that people use every day, right? Like, these are the infrastructures that we're incredibly excited about. You mentioned earlier, like, using an iPhone or using a computer to be able to run inference, for example. There's a lot of interesting teams working on that. And so I would recommend people look at that space generally as well, because it's something that we're excited about right now, too.
Okay. June, anyone you'd add to
Yes,
the list?
from my side, it will be WorldCoin as well. Basically, we were one of the earliest investors for Sam's WorldCoin as well, because we thought it solves the catch-22 phrase. What it means by that is that, like, if you look into just by Southeast Asia, 60% or more are underbanked or underserved. They don't have a passport or they don't have a bank account. But this World ID allows you to have that real-world utilities that they couldn't afford not having those bank accounts, right? And also, you see a lot of the spooky orbs in the Raffles Place here in Singapore. So migrant workers who weren't able to afford the infrastructure in this country were able to scan their biometric data and also reap financial rewards as well. On top of that, why we invested into WorldCoin is that Sam, basically is the CEO of OpenAI, which generates 3.7 billion per year of annual revenue. He has proven from ground zero that he could build a company, and that's why he also early invested into WorldCoin. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we've talked a little bit about some of the attributes that the panelists like to see in a DePIN project, and we've added some names of maybe DePIN projects that don't always get the credit that maybe they deserve and ought to be up there with some of the more commonly named projects. Now, I'm not going to ask you to name names for this next question, but are there I don't know about attributes about the specific project. It could be about the market or the space they're targeting or whatever. But are there things that look, just because it's DePIN doesn't mean you guys all, none of us automatically write a check. So are there things that are almost the inverse of what you guys shared a moment ago, where when you see it, you kind of go, it doesn't fit the bill?
Yeah, so I think that because we're dealing with physical assets and physical infrastructure, there are challenges that arise. Verification, for example, is a tricky one. So you have an asset that's trying to provide some sort of service, Well, you have to verify that that service is actually being provided and being used. Otherwise, it incentivizes anybody to join the network, to take advantage of that network, and that erodes trust. So there are definitely some challenges that still are being solved out in the DePIN space. And one thing that I especially value in a founder is when they can admit what they know and admit what they don't. And sometimes those challenges just haven't been fully solved yet. And we're getting there, and teams are working diligently towards them. But when a founder comes up and sort of makes this claim that everything is solved, everything's been figured out, and there's clearly some holes, that's one of the red flags that I think immediately pops up. It's okay to admit that there are still some things that need to be worked out, that we're still working towards this decentralized vision that we're going for.
So in other words, someone saying they know exactly how everything's going to work out doesn't actually give you more confidence, it gives you a little bit less confidence. Yeah.
Depending on how they do it, yeah.
Either you guys?
I briefly mentioned tokenomics, and just to highlight again, because I think, especially when talking with pre-seed seed founders, yes, it's still very early, but I like to chat with them how they think about how they are going to incentivize the network, because what we see is, in a lot of cases, projects launch token before finding product market fit and having these liquidity events earlier than they should happen. So even if you don't have crystal clear tokenomics at this early stage, we still like looking for teams that are thinking long term, because especially in this DePIN space, we want to see tokenomics schedules for the next 6 to 10 years, and not for the next 2 to 3 years.
It's so interesting, right? Because we're so used to seeing projects that seem to be looking about maybe 6 months down the road or till the next cycle. And so because these DePIN projects are so real, right, and they look like businesses as opposed to token, I don't know what, you need to see them actually thinking like a business that's going to pay off long term. Yeah, no, that's great. June?
For me, I think it's very simple. It's the UI UX point.
The UI?
UI UX is a big major bottleneck. I'm talking on the decentralized compute side a little. Like, if you want to host a model traditionally, you just go to AWS. You'll be just paying $20 easily, very seamless. But let's say, I won't give exact specific names, but on the decentralized compute, such as like we have IO.net, Akash, and Render, it takes multiple steps. You have to choose like which wallet, such as Kepler. There's different modular specification you have to choose. And that's why the conversion rate is actually lower than 1%, it's 0.5%. So that's where every user is churned out on the demand side. And I think UI UX has been solved, is being solved in the DeFi space with like intent-based executions like Cross, Cloud Swap, and the Uniswap X and the likes. In gaming, we have like the token-bound accounts. We have the account abstraction that allows you to play games seamlessly without any MetaMask popping up in the middle. So I think UI UX needs to be solved down the road as well.
And maybe to follow up on that, how much of that is sort of obscuring the fact that there's blockchain or tokens involved? Is that critical here, or?
I would say it's more of a trust issue and less of an exposure effect, reverse exposure effect, because most of the total addressable market comes from Web2, and Web3 is a still niche market. And if you want to target those users, they have an underlying assumption that crypto or NFTs is a scam, and there's a lack of trust. So I think the UI UX will resolve those, at least minimize those kind of trust issues that those Web2 users have. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So we've talked about how powerful this can be to disrupt industries. One question, and this isn't necessarily something that would make it investable for the four of us, but do you anticipate enterprise sort of saying, hey, wait a minute, I can use this model to roll out my hardware faster? Or does it have to be like some of the people in this room, kind of attackers, small teams, and it's being used to disrupt? Or could somebody, an established company, use a DePIN model to expand their footprint, or maybe attack an adjacent market?
I think using the example of sort of these distributed compute networks, right, that you were just mentioning, if you look at the pricing models for the big cloud providers, so your AWS, your Azure, your GCP, not only are they hypothesized, to be much higher than what market price would be, they're intentionally obfuscated. Like, they don't want you to know how much you're really supposed to be paying. And the reason that they can get away with that is because these three companies offer intense reliability. Like, you guarantee, if you're an enterprise company, 99.9% of the time your service is going to be up. And they're a public company, right? They're incentivized to keep those margins high. They're not incentivized to offer a public good and to make that, accessible. I think what will happen is these decentralized compute networks, as they solve some of their challenges, as they make usage a lot simpler and a lot easier and sort of solve the UI UX issue, they'll force these companies to come into the DePIN space because you make it into a competitive market. That's the beauty about these market dynamics being applied here, is that we're actually able to bring big institutionalized players and we're able to bring them into the public domain and we're able to say, offer fair pricing, offer pricing the way that we do. And I think that that will just take grinding and effort from a lot of the brilliant founders like the ones that we have in this room.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you could take, he's having a side conversation, so I won't drag him into this, but if you think about it, if I'm providing a GPU or a CPU network, well, those guys have a lot of those. They could potentially contribute them into the network as opposed to just their own vertically integrated stack. And I guess that would apply in a lot of other sectors too, right? So maybe the way they come in is not by being the direct sponsor themselves, but one of you was talking about all the different devices. That device up there, which I think is a Wi-Fi device, could go on to, say, Hivelo's network or onto anyone else that wants to tap into that capability and participate in it, even though it's presumably owned by a centralized entity. So that's a big part of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and I want to add one quick thing to that and highlight something going on in the ZK-TLS space. So companies like Opacity, for example, they're making it possible now to bring down those walled gardens even faster by enabling authentication of Web2 services that actually normally would control their own data. They're enabling that authentication on-chain permissionlessly using some very cool tech and some very cool math. But that, I think, also will speed up what we're going to see as the market forces trying to bring down pricing and make this just much more of a competitive landscape as well.
All right, so I threatened to let you guys ask some questions at the beginning of this, so I'm now going to do that. I'm prepared to keep asking questions, but I think we have 7-8 minutes maybe left, so happy to turn the mics over to you guys if anyone. Yeah, we've got one right, a couple right here in the first few rows, so we'll start there.
Hey, thank you very much. Hi, Celia, another DePIN project. We are, let's say, reaching the phase of maturity where we are going to scale up. So the question would be, are you guys interested in investing in a scale-up maturity stage or only on pre-seed, seed, pre-TG? Thank you.
So you, okay. What stage do you guys each invest in?
We, as an VC, it's not about like which stage the company we invest in. I think we do have our own investment strategy, investment thesis as well, and it's more about how much of our ownership, given depends on our confidence levels that we invest in. So we invest into growth stage as well. We do pre-TGs as well. We do early stage, mid stage, everything. It depends on our investment thesis and our bullish levelness of that project. So I think it's very of a malleable investment stage that we choose.
EV3?
I agree. Exact same answer.
You guys have
I mean, our strategy is mostly to try to find a project pre-seed, seed stage, start working together with the founders, and then later onwards double down, follow on once you build up even higher conviction.
Yeah. No, and I think part of the reason you heard the first two answers is there's something about the blockchain space, I think, where it's much more common to invest kind of more broadly and less kind of we only do seed or we only do A or we only do it seems like it's more of a thing here. And I think part of the reason is because the valuations, you can see pre-seed valuations where they want $100 million valuation, and in any other industry that's not even close, right? So I think that's also part of what's driving it. I like Jun's answer about hey, it's got to fit the thesis and then the ownership because that incorporates the entry point and the valuation. I think you had a question, yeah?
Yeah, actually, because I'm referring maybe to this question and what Joanna said about in DePIN we should think about more business for a few years, and actually this is the case we have. I have the DePIN project in the energy mobility use case. We are post-listing, our token is live, and we have revenue. Right now we are working on traction, and the question right now is how to chase VCs in Web3 space, or should I go just to traditional funds? Because this is actually the matter which in most cases happens when I'm talking here in venue.
Yeah, so I may see if I can speak for the panel. There are a lot of venture capitalists in the blockchain space who aren't, I'm going to make it sound like I'm disapproving. I'm not. It's just a different model. They're less interested in your business and more interested in your token and what the tokenomics are and when the unlocks are, et cetera. That's an absolute valid way for you to get money, and it's a valid way to be an investor. I think this group is maybe, as you picked up on, and certainly this is the case for us, we're going to really want to understand your business more like a venture capitalist you might see from other sectors. Not that the token's not interesting. That's, of course, interesting. It's part of how we potentially monetize our investment. But so the answer is it depends. I think it's shifting. You're getting more and more business-minded venture capitalists in our space. But that is the tricky thing. You can fall in between where you're too blockchain for the traditional investors, like non-blockchain investors. And as soon as they hear blockchain or crypto, they'll say, "Oh, well, we don't do what you do," even though we're energy investors. And then on the flip side, you can get, and again, probably not this group, but you can get blockchain investors for whom I don't understand energy. No, I can't do that. Like I only do tokens. So anyway, I think.
Yeah, I think rather than choosing between like tokenomics or token design and business, I think the question more fundamental should be, would this tokenization actually change meaningfully or add meaningfully to the current Web2 business? Like, just speaking on maybe on the verifiable AI side, like AI training, AI inferencing, everybody can do that on their host as well. But do we know actually this is verified using the actual inference results and whatnot? We need to clarify it using smart contracts that can be fully on-chain, for example. I think in that case, it adds kind of a meaningful difference by having a token. So I think the question should be more fundamentally on why token, and would it make a meaningful difference to the current Web2 business and the vertical you're focusing on as well. Yeah.
Go ahead, Rich.
Hey, Rich with XNet. Rob, I wanted to kind of build on a question you asked earlier. That's of quite important interest to me. But I think in the past, we've sort of framed crypto projects as being small, scrappy teams of barbarians at the gate, kind of beating on the infrastructure of the incumbents. Or you raise the question, might some incumbent come along and say, hey, I could decentralize my GPUs. Why not? I'm going to jump ape into this project here and then push everybody else out. But I think maybe the more interesting question from a DePIN perspective is there an emerging class of business models that involve leveraging decentralization to actually serve the interests of the incumbents, for example, XNet offloading data for big telcos. But I think there's a lot of models like this that are coming. And I'm just wondering to what extent you as investors are thinking about this as either kind of binary, little guy against the big guy, or say big guy is trying to co-opt the space. What about the sort of intermediate regime of projects that are being spun up simply to address the needs of the incumbents in the short run, perhaps in the long run to disrupt them?
I'm happy to kind of answer. I mean, if you, one of the things that's sort of been a pet peeve of mine, as I guess is obvious, I'm on the older side for this crowd, is in the internet briefly, the consumer internet briefly said, we're not going to deal with the rest of we're going to build it all from scratch, right? And that lasted a very short time. That has not been the case here, where we say we're going to speed run finance from the invention of the abacus, and we're going to just build it all fresh again, right? And I think part of your question is, isn't there an opportunity to actually sell services to the incumbents? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. And if you as much as we all will point to a company like Amazon as being a massive success that came out of the internet era, I bet you a lot, in fact I know, a lot more value was actually created wiring up every retailer that is anywhere in Singapore or in the US or in Germany or in Japan, et cetera, and making them internet enabled. And so, yeah, I think it's been, I think we've been philosophically misaligned, and as an industry, we're missing massive opportunities because we just sort of refuse to go after them. That would be my answer. And you seem like you agree with it since you're nodding.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, I think if we had one more question, we could take it. Okay, great.
Hold on, let me move.
Thank you. Looking at the industry, we see a lot of nice projects coming up, and I just doubt that people are going to buy 20 plus devices to put in their home. So how much is the combination or amalgamation part of the equation for you guys to invest in a project?
So the question is, if you think about like an example of DePINs where you have to actually buy the device, like at some point people are going to say, I'm not doing it anymore. I think you kind of answered this before, and you, go ahead and just.
I mean, I personally, like, I'm looking more for hardware-light businesses where you can utilize hardware that's already existing, laptops, phones, and so on. I think those are very exciting as you can scale those networks way faster than where the user needs to buy hardware. That's at least my personal.
Yeah. So one solve is just don't invest in the sort of latent assets that are already out. I mean, there's also everywhere you look, there's probably hardware that can be repurposed. Anything?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring up the example of Helium on this one, actually. So not everybody actually should have a Helium node. Like, the network will make sure they test to optimize coverage, but if you then add more nodes into a certain area, you'll actually get rewarded less. And that's to ensure that you're able to serve the needs of the people, but not every single human being is taking tokens and getting rewarded for maybe not providing as much coverage. And so I do think there's this interesting angle. I mean, I agree with everything that she said as well with using existing hardware. There's a lot of interesting projects building up, but I don't necessarily know that we're running towards a future where every single person will try to buy every single node and put it up in their home, just because if you're thoughtful with your tokenomics and if you're building out to actually solve a public need, you don't actually need every person to have it, and it doesn't make economical sense for you to end up having it, right? So I do think that there's definitely a place for aggregated technologies that will come out, and we'll probably see a lot of companies try to build some sort of super hub as well. But I think it's interesting to sort of note that not everybody necessarily needs to be deploying in their home for this to be an effective and useful technology.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same what you said. Basically, I think all the current DePIN projects have different specifications on the supply and demand side. So it's like, for now, well, it's a little fragmented, but if you buy all the devices, you guys can create like a cross-garden, like aggregator, which we haven't seen. And I think that person or that farmers or that miners who have different devices, I hope he or she could actually build those kind of aggregator platforms that could connect different walled gardens into one growing, overgrowing DePIN ecosystem as well. Yeah.
All right, so I'll turn it over to our rockin' MC here.
Great. Well, listen, let's give a round of applause for this last panel. Thank you, guys.